Part 1: The Warning. Ambassador Alara Vance stood alone in the center of the Galactic Council chamber. The room was a marvel of alien architecture, a perfect sphere of living crystal that seemed to breathe with a slow, deliberate rhythm. 12 platforms, each representing one of the oldest and most powerful species in the known galaxy, rose in a graceful circle around her. Strange, silent lights, like captive stars, drifted through the air above her head, casting long, shifting shadows. The walls of the chamber, a single unbroken piece of some sentient crystalline structure, mirrored the emotional state of the room. Right now, it was a dull, bored gray, a color Alara had come to know all too well. She had stood here 6 times before. Each time she had come with warnings, each time she had been ignored. Today would be her 7th attempt. A soft, chime-like sound drew her attention to the platform of the Xylos. High Arbiter Xyler leaned forward, his ancient form a silhouette against the glowing backdrop of his station. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His body was thin and tall, covered in fine, silver scales that shimmered and caught the spectral light of the chamber. His eyes, completely black and depthless, seemed to absorb the light around them. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it echoed through the vast chamber with the resonance of wind whistling through a vast, empty cave. Ambassador Vance, he began, his words slow and deliberate, each one carefully chosen. You come before us again with the same concerns. The Xar hegemony has expanded its borders. They have claimed 3 systems that your species also claims. This is not unusual. Borders shift. Species adapt. This is the way of the galaxy. Alara kept her voice calm, her posture relaxed. She had practiced this speech, refined it, and knew it by heart. High Arbiter, she began, her voice clear and steady in the immense silence. The Xar have not simply claimed these systems. They have issued a formal proclamation. They have announced their intention to forcibly remove all human colonists from 3 populated worlds. New Alexandria has a population of 40 million souls. Sanctuary has 12 million. Port Sterling has 8 million. These are not empty rocks waiting for a flag. They are our homes. They are filled with our families, our children, our history. A harsh, grating sound came from one of the upper platforms. It was something like laughter, but deeper, more resonant, and infinitely cruel. It was the Xar ambassador. A massive creature, covered in thick, black armor-like skin, rose to his full height. Warlord Speaker Crag was nearly 3 meters tall, a terrifying figure of brute strength. 4 powerful arms emerged from his broad shoulders, each ending in claws that could, as Alara knew from intelligence reports, cut through the hull of a starship with minimal effort. Homes can be moved, Crag growled, his voice rough, like stones grinding together in an avalanche. Your people are soft. They will leave when our fleet arrives. They always do. Every species runs from the Xar. It is the natural order. The strong take what they need. The weak flee or perish. Alara turned to face him. She was small compared to him. All humans were small compared to most of the Council species. But she did not look away. She met his gaze without flinching. We have requested formal diplomatic discussions on 16 separate occasions. We have proposed shared resource agreements that would have benefited both our species. We have offered compromises on every single point of contention. Your empire has refused all of these overtures without explanation. Crag showed his teeth, a display of serrated, metallic spikes that was in no way a smile. Why would we negotiate for what we can simply take? Negotiation is a tool of the weak, a delay of the inevitable. High Arbiter Xyler raised one thin, 3-fingered hand. Peace, Warlord Speaker. Ambassador Vance, the Council has studied your species carefully since first contact 2 centuries ago. We have observed your history, your culture, your behavior. We understand humans quite well. Alara felt something cold and heavy settle in her stomach. And what do you believe you understand? Xyler's black eyes seemed to look through her, into her very soul. Humans fear war. This is obvious in everything you create. Your literature is filled with stories about the horrors of combat, the psychological scars it leaves. Your soldiers return from battle with what you call damaged minds. You build monuments to those who die in conflict. You teach your children that violence is the ultimate evil. Your leaders have signed treaty after treaty, seeking peace above all else. He paused, letting the words hang in the silent chamber. You are a traumatized species. Xyler continued, his tone almost clinical. Somewhere in your past, you experienced violence so terrible, so profound, that it broke something inside you on a civilizational level. Now, you cannot fight. The very idea of war fills you with a paralyzing dread. This is not an insult, Ambassador. It is simply an observation. Many species are not suited for conflict. There is no shame in this. Elara stood very still. Around her, representatives from other species nodded their agreement. She could see it in their eyes, in their posture. They had already made their decision. They thought they understood humanity. They understood nothing. High Arbiter, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I must tell you that your analysis is incomplete. We have studied you for 200 years, Xyler replied, a hint of impatience in his voice. Our analysis is thorough. You have studied our words, Elara countered, her voice growing stronger. You have read our poems. You have watched our movies. You have listened to our politicians. You have not studied our history. Not our real history. There was a moment of silence. Then Crag laughed again, that deep, grinding sound. What history? We know your history. You fought small, primitive wars on your little planet. You killed each other with crude weapons. Then you discovered space travel. And you stopped fighting. Because you are afraid. Elara turned to face him fully. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes, a cold fire, made the Kthar ambassador pause for just a moment. We did not stop fighting because we are afraid, she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight. We stopped fighting because we had to. Because if we had continued, there would have been no one left. There would have been no humans to travel to the stars. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. In the last great war on our world, a conflict you call the Final War, we killed 80 million of our own kind. Not over centuries, but over 6 years. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. We built machines that could kill thousands from the other side of the planet, and we used them. We turned whole regions of our world into radioactive wastelands, poisoned for 1,000 generations. The chamber was silent now. Even Crag had stopped laughing. After that war, Elena continued, we looked at what we had become. We looked at the ashes of our cities and the graves of our children, and we made a choice. A collective choice. We chose to build a different future. We wrote poetry about peace because we had seen too much war. We built monuments to the dead because we never wanted to forget the cost. We taught our children that violence is wrong because we did not want them to become what we had been. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle upon them. But we did not forget how to fight. We simply chose not to. Xyler waved one thin hand dismissively. Pretty words, Ambassador. But words do not win wars. The Council has made its decision. The Kthar hegemony will be granted territorial adjustment rights to the disputed systems. Your colonists will be given 60 standard days to evaluate. This matter is closed. Elara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Very well, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. I will inform my government of your decision. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. At the great archway of the door, she paused and looked back. High Arbiter, she said, her voice clear and cold as ice. I want you to remember something. When this is over, I want you to remember that I came here 7 times. I asked for help. I offered peace. I warned you about what would happen. And you did not listen. Then she was gone. Xyler turned to his fellow council members. A dramatic exit, he observed, but meaningless. The humans will complain and then they will leave their colonies. They have no choice. They cannot fight the Kthar. On his platform, Crag was already rising, his mind already planning his invasion. 60 million soft, frightened humans. They would flee at the first sight of his warships. It would be the easiest conquest in Kthar history. Part 2: The Answer. Across the galaxy, in a bunker buried deep beneath the mountains of a small European country on Earth, a secure communication arrived from Ambassador Alara Vance. High-ranking military officials gathered around a large, secure screen. They read her message in silence. The Council has refused all diplomatic options. The Kthar have been given legal authority to take our colonies. They believe we will not fight. They believe we cannot fight. God help them, they are wrong. The highest-ranking officer in the room was Fleet Admiral Marcus Thorne. He was 63 years old, his face a map of worry lines, his hair more gray than black. He had spent his entire adult career hoping he would never have to open the sealed orders that waited in the vault behind him. For 80 years, those orders had remained unopened. Every admiral before him had passed them to the next, each praying they would never be needed. He walked to the vault, the heavy door a stark reminder of the burden of his command. He entered the complex codes that only he knew. The heavy door swung open with a hiss of decompressing air, and he removed a single, simple folder marked with one word, Prometheus. He opened it. Inside, on a single sheet of aged paper, were two words, No Mercy. Admiral Thorne closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of 2 centuries of history settling on his shoulders. Then he began making calls. Across human space, in secret shipyards hidden in the deep darkness between stars, in the hollowed-out cores of asteroids and in the shadows of gas giants, lights began to turn on. Engines that had been cold for decades began to warm up, their energy signatures masked by sophisticated cloaking fields. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come received a single, simple message on their personal communicators. It was time. Warlord Crag stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Iron Fist. Around him, 400 warships of the Kthar Third Expansion Fleet moved through the silent vacuum of space in perfect, intimidating formation. They were the pride of the hegemony, a fleet that had brought death and subjugation to 11 species before them. The colony world of New Alexandria hung in the darkness ahead of them, a beautiful blue and white marble. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling white clouds. A vibrant, living world. Soon, it would belong to the Kthar. Scan the planet, Crag ordered, his voice a low rumble. His tactical officer, a Kthar with even more scars than his commander, worked the controls. A moment later, confusion crossed his armored face. Warlord, the cities are empty. Thermal scans show no significant population centers. The humans appear to have already evaluated. Crag felt a wave of disgust. He had hoped for at least a small fight, some entertainment before claiming his prize. Cowards, he snarled. They run before we even arrive. The Council was right about them. Warlord, the sensor officer added, I am detecting minimal orbital defenses. 3 automated platforms. No warships, no resistance. This was almost insulting. Crag had brought 400 ships to conquer a world defended by 3 platforms. He would be mocked when he returned home. There was no glory in conquering an empty planet. Destroy the platforms and begin landing operations, he ordered with a wave of his claw. Claim this world for the hegemony. The fleet moved into orbital position. The 3 defense platforms were destroyed in seconds, their feeble shields collapsing under the combined firepower of the Kthar fleet. Crag watched the small explosions on the main view screen with boredom. This was not war. This was cleanup. Then his sensor officer spoke again, and this time there was something strange in his voice, a note of confusion and alarm. Warlord, a vessel is approaching from behind the planet's moon. 1 vessel. Crag turned. What kind of ship would face a fleet of 400 alone? The image appeared on the main display. Crag stared at it. The ship was old, very old. Its hull was covered in scars, patches, and the marks of ancient repairs. It looked like something that should have been scrapped centuries ago. It was not even 1/10 the size of his flagship. They send this against us? Crag laughed, a deep, resonant sound that was echoed by his officers on the bridge. One ancient piece of garbage? Are they trying to insult us? A communication signal came through. Crag nodded, and a human voice, calm and composed, filled the bridge. Thar Fleet. This is Captain Eva Rostova of the UNS Icarus. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have been warned multiple times through diplomatic channels. This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Leave now and you will not be harmed. Stay and you will be destroyed. Silence hung on the bridge for a moment. Then Crag began to laugh, a deep, booming sound that was quickly joined by his crew. The laughter spread through the fleet as the message was shared on secure channels. Destroy them, Crag commanded, still chuckling. One ship threatening 400. Human captain, Crag replied, opening a channel. I have conquered 11 worlds. My fleet has never known defeat. You stand before me with one broken ship and threaten me. He leaned forward, his massive frame filling the viewscreen on the Icarus. I will enjoy making an example of you. I understand, Warlord, Captain Rostova replied, her voice calm, almost sad. I had to try. What happens next is your choice. Crag gave the order. Destroy that ship. 50 Thar vessels opened fire simultaneously. Weapons that could crack the crusts of planets reached out toward the tiny human vessel. The Icarus should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, it exploded on its own. From the inside. For a moment, Crag was confused. Had the humans destroyed themselves rather than face his weapons? How pathetic. Then his tactical officer screamed a warning. The Icarus had not been a ship. It had been a weapon delivery system. In the microsecond before it detonated, it had launched 12 objects. These objects were small, no larger than a Thar warrior. They were made of an ultra-dense material, and they were traveling at 40% of the speed of light. At that velocity, mass became death. Each projectile carried more kinetic energy than a tactical nuclear weapon. They crossed the distance to the Thar fleet in less than a blink of an eye. In an instant, 200 ships ceased to exist. There was no fireball, no dramatic explosion that Crag could see. No wreckage. The ships were simply there one moment and gone the next, erased from reality by impacts that released more energy than the surface of a star. The shock waves from the strikes tore through the remaining fleet, damaging another 50 vessels and sending them spinning out of control. Crag grabbed his command console as his ship shook violently, the metal groaning in protest. Alarms screamed around him. Half his fleet was gone. Half. In less than a heartbeat. What happened? He roared, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. What happened? Before anyone could answer, his sensor officer spoke again, the fear in his voice something Crag had never heard from a Thar warrior. Warlord, new contacts emerging from the outer system. Many contacts. How many? The officer's claws trembled as he read the display, his eyes wide with terror. I count 4,000 vessels. No, more. They are still emerging. 5,000. 6. Warlord, there are more ships appearing every second. Crag stared at the tactical display. It was filling with red markers. Human ships. Thousands of them. They were coming from the darkness between planets, from hidden positions in asteroid fields, from places where no fleet should have been able to hide. These ships looked nothing like the ancient vessel that had sacrificed itself. These were weapons of war. Sleek, angular, covered in dark armor, and bristling with guns, they moved in perfect coordination, spreading out to surround what remained of his fleet. A new communication signal came through. Crag accepted it with numb fingers. A human face appeared on the screen. An older man with gray hair and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a military uniform covered in medals that Cragg did not recognize. "I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Thorne of the United Earth Navy," the human said, his voice as cold as the void between the stars. "Your fleet has been neutralized. Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist and you will be destroyed completely." Cragg found his voice, though it was a hoarse shadow of its former self. "This is impossible. Where did these ships come from? Our intelligence said you had no military fleet." Admiral Thorne's expression did not change. "Your intelligence was wrong. We have spent 200 years building this fleet in secret. We hoped we would never need to use it. We built shipyards in the darkness of our outer system and places where no one would ever think to look. We trained our soldiers in simulators that your spies could not detect. We prepared for a war we prayed would never come." "Why?" Cragg demanded, his voice cracking. "Why hide this?" "Because we understand something that your kind does not," Thorne replied. "War is not glory. War is not honor. War is horror. It is death and suffering and destruction on a scale you cannot imagine. We know this because we have experienced it. We built our hidden fleet not because we wanted war, but because we knew that someday someone would force us to fight." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes seeming to bore through the screen. "You should have listened to our ambassador. You should have accepted our offers of peace. We gave you every opportunity to avoid this. You chose war instead. Now you will learn what that means." The tactical display showed human ships moving into attack positions. 200 Thar vessels against 6,000 human warships. The mathematics of destruction were simple. "You misunderstood us," Admiral Thorne continued. "Your council studied our poetry and our protests and our monuments to the dead. They concluded that we fear war. They were wrong. We do not fear war. We fear what we become when we wage it. We fear the monster that lives inside us. The monster that we spend every day trying to keep locked away." His eyes seemed to bore through the screen. "You have unlocked the cage. God help you all." Cragg looked at his dying fleet. He looked at the thousands of human ships surrounding him. And for the first time in his long, violent life, the great Thar warlord felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. "All ships," Admiral Thorne commanded, his voice echoing through the comm channels of the human fleet. "Weapons free." The darkness of space lit up with fire. Part 3: The Judgment. Across the galaxy, in the Galactic Council chamber, sensor stations began receiving frantic, corrupted data streams from the new Alexandria system. High Arbiter Xyler watched the reports with growing horror, the living crystal walls of the chamber pulsing with a deep, blood-red light. The Thar Third Fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, had been destroyed in 11 minutes. And the human fleet was not stopping. It was moving toward Thar space. This was not a defense. This was an invasion. Xyler had studied humans for 2 centuries. He had been certain he understood them. He had been wrong about everything. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every major species had gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief. The living crystal walls pulsed with a deep, urgent red, reflecting the terror that filled the room. High Arbiter Xyler stood at the center platform, his silver scales dull with stress. Around him, voices overlapped in dozens of languages, all asking the same questions. How did this happen? What did the humans do? What will they do next? Silence, Xyler commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Slowly, the room grew quiet. We have received full reports from the new Alexandria system. I will share what we know. He activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between the platforms. The Thar Third Fleet, 400 warships, reduced to floating debris and expanding clouds of gas in 11 minutes. The humans have revealed a hidden military force that our intelligence services did not know existed, Xyler said, his voice heavy. Approximately 8,000 warships, constructed in secret over the past 2 centuries. They used weapons we have never seen before. Kinetic projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Energy weapons of unknown design. Electronic warfare systems that disabled Kthar's shields before the battle even began. A Xylos counselor raised a trembling hand. How is this possible? We monitored them. We watched their shipyards. They showed no signs of military construction. They built their fleet in the outer reaches of their system, Xyler replied, his voice hollow. In the cold darkness where no one thought to look. They hid it from us for 200 years. Another counselor spoke up, a being made of shifting crystalline structures. But their culture, their hatred of war, their trauma. We studied them so carefully. A new voice cut through the chamber. It was deep and ancient, and it came from a platform that had been silent for 4,000 years. Everyone turned to look. The archivist, one of the oldest intelligences in the galaxy, had spoken. It had been created by a species that no longer existed, designed to preserve knowledge forever. It rarely spoke. When it did, civilizations listened. You studied their words, the archivist said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. You did not study their actions. You read their poetry about peace and concluded they could not fight. You saw their memorials to the dead and thought them weak. You watched their anti-war protests and believed they were afraid. The archivist paused, and the silence in the chamber was absolute. You were fools. Xyler's scales shifted color, a sign of agitation. Explain. Humans do not write poetry about peace because they are peaceful, the archivist continued. They write about peace because they have seen too much war. They do not build memorials because they are weak. They build memorials to remind themselves of the terrible cost of violence. They do not protest war because they fear it. They protest because they know what war does to them, what it makes them become. The AI's voice grew heavier. In their history, humans have killed each other in numbers that would horrify any species in this chamber. They invented weapons that could destroy entire cities. They built bombs that could end all life on their planet. They came to the very edge of complete self-destruction. Images appeared in the holographic display. Ancient human cities reduced to ash. Battlefields covered with the dead. Weapons tests that turned deserts to glass. They did not stop fighting because they became weak, the archivist continued. They stopped fighting because they had to, because they realized that their capacity for violence was so great that it would destroy them completely if they did not learn to control it. Every law they made against war, every treaty they signed, every lesson they taught their children about peace, these were not signs of weakness. They were chains they built for themselves. Chains to hold back the monster within. The archivist fell silent. After a long moment, Xyler spoke. And now the chains are broken. The Kthar attacked their homes, the archivist replied. They gave the humans permission to stop being peaceful. And the galaxy will learn what humanity is truly capable of. Far across the stars, the human fleet had reached Kthar Prime, the home world of the Kthar hegemony. The supreme command of the Kthar military had gathered every ship they could find. 12,000 warships formed a wall around their planet. They were the conquerors of 11 species. They had never lost a war. Admiral Thorne looked at the defensive formation and felt nothing but cold determination. Behind him, 8,000 human warships waited for his orders. Admiral, his tactical officer reported. They outnumber us by 4,000 vessels. Numbers are irrelevant, Thorne replied. Launch the first wave. Small craft began deploying from the human fleet. Not warships, but transport vessels. They moved toward the 3 largest orbital shipyards that ringed Kthar Prime. The Kthar fleet commander watched in confusion. The humans were not engaging his main fleet. They were sending small ships toward the shipyards. Were they trying to capture them with such tiny forces? Let them come, he ordered. Our warriors will destroy them in close combat. Let the humans learn what it means to face Kthar claws. Each shipyard held thousands of Kthar warriors. They were the elite of the hegemony, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor with 4 arms ending in claws that could tear through metal. They had fought in hundreds of boarding actions. They had never lost in personal combat. No species in the galaxy could match a Kthar warrior in close combat. Ever. The human transport ships docked with the shipyards. Airlocks opened. And the Kthar learned how wrong they were. The humans who emerged wore powered armor that made them nearly as large as a Kthar warrior. They moved with incredible speed, their suits amplifying their natural strength and reflexes. They carried weapons that fired projectiles at speeds that could punch through Kthar armor like paper. But it was not their technology that terrified the Kthar. It was the way the humans fought. A Kthar warrior slashed at a human marine, his claws cutting deep into the armor. The human did not fall, did not retreat, did not even slow down. With one arm hanging useless, the marine grabbed the Kthar with the other hand and drove a combat knife through its eye. Another marine took a wound that would have killed most species. She fought for 3 more minutes, her suit's medical systems injecting her with a cocktail of stimulants and painkillers, before her body finally failed her. The humans advanced through the shipyards with cold, systematic efficiency. They adapted to Kthar tactics within minutes. When the Kthar tried ambushes, the humans developed countertactics almost instantly. When the Kthar warriors charged in groups, the humans cut them down with precise, overlapping fields of fire. When the Kthar tried to retreat, the humans followed, showing no mercy. The boarding action lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 40,000 Kthar warriors were dead. Human casualties were 847. The last surviving Kthar commander on the shipyard sent a final, garbled transmission to his fleet before he died. His voice was breaking with something no Kthar had ever felt before. "They are not afraid," he said. "We thought they were cowards. We were wrong. They are not running. They are not hesitating. They are angry. And they are so much worse than us." On the command bridge of the Iron Vengeance, the Kthar fleet commander listened to the transmission. He looked at the human fleet arrayed before him. For the first time in Kthar history, a supreme commander considered the possibility of defeat. "What are they?" he whispered. Across the battle line, Admiral Thorn gave his next order. "All ships, engage the main fleet. Show them what Earth can do." The human fleet surged forward. They were outnumbered, but they fought with a terrifying, focused fury. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel supporting the others. Their weapons struck with terrible accuracy. Their shields held against attacks that should have destroyed them. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Kthar fleet was broken. 8,000 of their 12,000 ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 4,000 drifted helplessly, their crews surrendering to avoid complete destruction. Admiral Thorn looked at Kthar Prime through the viewport. The planet was defenseless now. He could destroy it if he wished. He could order his ships to fire on their cities and burn their civilization to ash. But that was not what humans did. That was not who they chose to be. "Launch humanitarian vessels," he ordered. "Tend to the wounded. Prepare occupation forces. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to end a threat." The Galactic Council would later learn the human word for what came next: justice. Ambassador Alara Vance walked into the Galactic Council chamber for the 8th time. The room was exactly the same as it had always been. The 12 platforms still rose in a circle. The living crystal walls still shifted colors. The floating light still drifted through the air. But everything was different now. The representatives who had once looked at her with boredom and pity now watched her with fear. Some would not meet her eyes. Others stared at her as if she were some kind of monster wearing human skin. The Kthar ambassador's platform was empty. Their empire was burning. Alara took her place in the center of the room. She stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back, her face calm. High Arbiter Xyler spoke first. His voice was not as confident as it had once been. "Ambassador Vance, you have requested this audience. The Council recognizes you." "Thank you, High Arbiter," Alara replied. She looked around the chamber slowly. I am here to explain what humanity is doing and why. I am also here to discuss what happens next. Xyler leaned forward. Your fleet has destroyed the Kthar navy. Your soldiers have captured their shipyards. Your forces now surround their home world. What more do you intend to do? Elara nodded. I understand your concern. Many species throughout history have used moments like this to commit terrible acts. Genocide, enslavement, complete destruction. You are wondering if humanity will do the same. No one spoke. The silence was answer enough. We will not, Elara said simply. That is not who we are. But I need you to understand why we are doing what we are doing. Because you clearly did not understand before. She began to walk slowly around the center platform as she spoke. Humans have a concept called proportional response. It does not mean what many species think it means. We do not believe in responding to an attack with equal force. We believe in responding with overwhelming force, with devastating force. We believe in making the cost of attacking us so terrifying that no rational being would ever consider it. She paused and looked up at the platforms. You called this fear. You were wrong. We call it deterrence. The crystalline counselor spoke up. But your culture speaks constantly of peace, of mercy, of avoiding violence. Yes, Elara agreed. Because we know what we are capable of. We teach our children about the horrors of war specifically so they will understand why we must avoid it. We build memorials to remind ourselves of the cost. We write poetry about peace because we have seen what happens when peace fails. She stopped walking and faced Xyler directly. Our reluctance to fight is not weakness. It is wisdom. We know exactly what we can do when we stop holding back. We choose peace because the alternative is too terrible. Xyler's black eye steadied her. And now that you have stopped holding back. Elara's expression did not change. The Kthar hegemony attacked our colonies. They threatened to remove 60 million of our people from their homes. They refused every diplomatic option we offered. They chose war. So, you will destroy them? No, Elara said. We will remove their ability to threaten anyone ever again. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing a map of the Kthar hegemony. Our forces are currently dismantling every military installation in their space. Every shipyard, every weapons factory, every military academy, every research facility developing weapons. When we are finished, the Kthar will not be able to wage war. Not on us, not on anyone. Xyler looked at the display. Red markers showed human forces at dozens of locations across Kthar space. You are destroying their entire military capacity. Yes. What of their civilian population? They will not be harmed, Elara's voice was firm. Our rules of engagement are absolute. Civilian targets are forbidden. Every soldier in our military knows that harming noncombatants is a crime that will be punished severely. We are not murderers, High Arbiter. We are not monsters. From another platform, a different counselor spoke. Its body was made of flowing energy, constantly shifting. The Kthar Supreme Command has refused to surrender. They say they will fight to the last warrior. Elara nodded. We expected this. They do not believe they can lose. They have never lost before. So, we will teach them how. We have deployed weapons that we hoped we would never use. Self-replicating machines that consume military infrastructure. Gravity projectors that can collapse shipyards into themselves. Automated hunter systems that pursue fleeing warships across light years. She paused. We invented these weapons decades ago. We sealed them away because they were too terrible. The Kthar have given us no choice but to use them. The chamber was silent. Elara could see the representatives calculating, imagining what such weapons could do if turned on their own civilizations. You should all understand something, she continued. We do not want this. We never wanted this. Every weapon we deploy, every Kthar soldier we kill costs us something. Our soldiers do not enjoy killing. Many of them will carry scars from this war for the rest of their lives. Some will never fully recover. She looked around the room again. This is what you did not understand about our monuments and our poetry and our protests. We hate war not because we are weak, but because we know what it costs. We know what it does to the people who fight it. We know what it does to our own souls. The Xylos counselor who had spoken earlier raised a trembling hand. What do you want from us, Ambassador? Why are you here? Elara straightened. I am here to deliver a message. Humanity will not seek to join your council. We will not try to become a major power in your politics. We will not attempt to conquer or control. When this war is over, we will return to our own space and continue building the civilization we want to build. She continued, and her voice grew harder. But you should all understand that there are lines that cannot be crossed. Unprovoked aggression against civilian populations. Genocide. Slavery. If we see these things happening in the galaxy, we will act. Not because we want power, but because we cannot stand by while innocents suffer. Xyler spoke carefully. You would appoint yourselves as judges over the galaxy. No, Elara shook her head. We do not want to rule anyone. We simply want to live in peace. But we have learned through bitter experience that peace sometimes must be defended. That evil does not stop simply because you ask it to. That sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to destroy those who threaten them. She met Xyler's eyes. The Cthar conquered 11 species before us. Where was the council then? Where was justice for those civilizations? You stood by and did nothing because the Cthar were useful to you. Because they kept other species afraid and obedient. No one argued. The accusation hung in the air. We are not your police, Elara concluded. We are not your army. We are simply a species that knows what it is capable of and chooses to use that capability only when absolutely necessary. The Cthar made it necessary. We hope no one else ever will. She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back. In 3 weeks, the Cthar military will be completely dismantled. We will establish a temporary administration to ensure the transition is peaceful. When their society has stabilized, we will help them rebuild, not as conquerors, but as neighbors. That is the human way. She paused. Remember this, counselors. Remember what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Remember what happens when you ignore warnings and choose violence. Then she was gone. Across Cthar space, human forces continued their systematic work. Shipyards collapsed. Weapons factories went dark. Militaries were emptied. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was being taken apart piece by piece. And through it all, not a single civilian was harmed. The humans were true to their word. They were not conquerors. They were not destroyers. They were something far more frightening. They were judges, and their judgment was final. 1 year had passed since the end of the war. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one had expected. The Cthar hegemony no longer existed. In its place was the Cthar Protectorate, a collection of worlds under joint human and council supervision. The former conquerors were learning, slowly and painfully, how to be something other than warriors. Human administrators worked alongside local leaders to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. Food shipments arrived regularly from Earth. Reconstruction programs employed millions. It was not kindness. It was strategy. The humans understood that crushing an enemy completely only created future enemies. They had learned this lesson many times in their own history. So, they chose a different path. They dismantled the Cthar military, but they helped the Cthar people. They showed former enemies that there was a better way to exist. Some Cthar hated them for it. Others, especially the younger generations, began to see possibilities they had never imagined before. In the Galactic Council chamber, a new platform had been added. It was placed at the same level as the original 12. Neither higher nor lower. Ambassador Alara Vance stood upon it, representing humanity's first official seat on the council. High Arbiter Xyler called the session to order. His scales had returned to their normal silver color, but there was a new weariness in his black eyes. He looked at the human ambassador with a respect that had not existed before. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Vance of the United Earth Government," he announced. "We welcome humanity as a full member of the Galactic Council." Alara bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, High Arbiter. Humanity accepts this position with gratitude and humility." Xyler's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Humility. An interesting word choice, given recent events. "Recent events are exactly why humility is important," Alara replied. "We have demonstrated what we can do. We have no desire to do it again. Humanity does not want to be a dominant power in this galaxy. We want to be good neighbors." The crystalline counselor spoke up. "You have conditions, though. You expressed them before." "We do," Alara nodded. "We will participate in this council. We will engage in trade and diplomacy. We will share technology and knowledge. But we will not be used as a weapon by other species. We will not fight wars for your political interests. And we will not ignore atrocities simply because they happen far from our own space." She looked around the chamber. "There are certain things we cannot accept. Genocide. Enslavement. The deliberate destruction of civilian populations. If we see these things, we will act. Regardless of what this council decides. This is not negotiable." Xyler exchanged glances with the other counselors. Finally, he nodded. "These conditions are acceptable. We do not wish to see what happens when humanity acts again." The session continued with diplomatic matters. Trade agreements were discussed. Border arrangements were finalized. Scientific exchanges were proposed. It was the ordinary business of civilizations learning to work together. But underneath all of it, everyone in the chamber knew that something fundamental had changed. The humans sat among them now, quiet and polite and reasonable. They smiled at jokes. They compromised on minor points. They behaved exactly like any other diplomatic species. And yet, every counselor remembered the videos from the war. The Kthar fleets vanishing in flashes of light. The shipyards crumbling. The systematic dismantling of an empire in 3 weeks. The cold efficiency of soldiers who did not stop when wounded, who adapted faster than any species had ever seen, who fought with a terrible focus that left no room for mercy until the battle was won. Humanity was polite. Humanity was reasonable. Humanity preferred peace. But humanity was also something else entirely. After the session ended, Alara was approached by an unexpected visitor. The archivist, that ancient intelligence that had spoken during the crisis, requested a private audience. They met in a small room off the main chamber, where floating lights drifted through the air and the walls displayed images of distant stars. "Ambassador Vance," the archivist said. Its voice was gentle, almost warm. "I have a question that I believe only a human can answer." Alara sat down on a curved bench. "Ask." "Your species restrains itself with laws, ethics, cultural traditions," the AI began. "You teach your children that violence is wrong. You build institutions specifically designed to prevent war. These restraints have held for centuries now. But they are artificial. They are choices your species makes each generation." The AI paused. "What happens if those restraints ever fail?" Alara was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the stars displayed on the walls. She thought about the history of her species, the wars they had fought, the weapons they had built, the times they had come so close to destroying themselves completely. "That is the question we ask ourselves every day," she finally said. "It is the question that keeps our leaders awake at night. It is the question we teach in every school, discuss in every philosophy class, debate in every government." She turned to face the AI directly. "We know what we are. We know the monster that lives inside us. Every human carries it. The capacity for violence beyond measure. The ability to become something terrible when pushed far enough. And yet you control it, the archivist observed. We try, Alara smiled. But it was not a happy smile. We work very hard to control it. We build systems and traditions and beliefs specifically to keep the monster locked away. Every generation teaches the next about the horrors of war, so they will never forget why we must avoid it. She paused. But you asked what happens if the restraints fail. If somehow, someday, humanity stops holding itself back. If the monster is truly set free. Yes. Alara looked at the stars again. I do not know. I hope we never find out. But I can tell you this. We are aware of the danger. We guard against it constantly. Not because we fear what others might do to us, but because we fear what we might do to others. The archivist was silent for a moment. Then it spoke again. I have studied thousands of species over millions of years. Most species do not think this way. They do not build chains for themselves. They do not fear their own capabilities. They simply act according to their nature. Humanity is different. Alara agreed. We understand our nature too well to trust it. That understanding is our greatest strength and our heaviest burden. The AI made a sound that might have been a sigh. Then perhaps there is hope for this galaxy after all. A species that fears itself more than it fears others. That restrains its own power by choice. That shows mercy even when it has no need to. Such a species might truly change things for the better. Alara stood up. That is what we hope. That is what we work toward every day. Not to be conquerors, but to be good. Not to rule, but to help. Not to destroy, but to build. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. But remember this. Our mercy is a choice. Our peace is a choice. If anyone forces us to make a different choice, we will. And the galaxy has now seen what happens when we do. She left the ancient AI alone with its thoughts. In the months that followed, a new saying spread through the galaxy. It started among the Thar survivors, whispered by warriors who had faced human soldiers in combat and somehow lived. It spread to trading posts and diplomatic stations. It was taught in militaries and discussed in council chambers. The council's historical records on humanity were updated. The old entry had read, humans, Category 7 species. Territorial. Fragile. Risk-averse. Minimal threat. The new entry was quite different. Humans, Apex category. Highly social. Extremely adaptable. Possess unparalleled capacity for both violence and mercy. Exercise extreme caution in all interactions. Do not mistake their restraint for inability. Do not mistake their mercy for weakness. Above all, do not give them a reason to stop being merciful. And at the bottom, added by some unknown hand, was the saying that had spread across the stars. Humans do not fear war. War fears humans. But humanity fears itself most of all. And that is the only thing keeping the rest of us safe. In her quarters on Nixura Prime, Ambassador Alara Vance read the updated entry and allowed herself a small, sad smile. It was not entirely accurate, she thought. Humanity was more complicated than any record could capture. But it was close enough. She turned off her display and looked out the window at the alien stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were growing. Human children were being born on new worlds. Human civilization was spreading slowly and peacefully across the galaxy. They had won their war. They had proven their strength. Now came the harder task. Proving that they could be trusted with that strength. Proving that the monster could stay locked away. Proving that humanity could be what it chose to be, rather than what it was capable of being. It would take generations. It would never truly be finished. But Alara believed they could do it. They had come so far already. And if they ever failed, if the chains ever broke, if the monster ever escaped completely, well, that was a problem for another day. For now, there was peace. And humanity would fight to keep it. Even if they had to fight themselves.